You know, they say that politics is the art of the possible. And I think looking at the disposition so far of the UAP Disclosure Act, we are seeing that axiom in progress in action here, because this was a tough ask to expect all of the rest of the military-industrial complex to simply allow it happen and walk away from the table. They have been involved in an 80-year cover-up of the UAP UFO reality. This is not something that they're just going to walk away from and say, oh yes, we're going to give up all of our advantages and secrets that we have accrued over the last 8 decades. I think we had to expect that there would be something like this. I mean, essentially, we're talking about not the complete gutting of the UAP Disclosure Act, but definitely a substantial weakening of that act. I'll come back to the details of that act in a moment, but I just want to provide my own opinions, my own assessment, I suppose I should say, as to why the military-industrial complex will not walk away and relinquish their hold over this issue. I think the number one reason is not necessarily the giving away of the reality that there are other beings here on this planet. That is a big thing. But the fact is that these groups, whether it's the actual military itself, the black budget world within the military particularly, or the private contractors working with them, they have technology. They have craft, we know this. They have been studying this technology on every level, whether it's anti-gravitics or electrogravitics, anti-gravity technology, whether it's various aspects of materials science, whether it's weaponry applications based on the technology they've studied. We must know that they have been looking at all of these and more for the past 80 years. And as we've heard from many sources, both pre-David Grusch and pre-Lou Elizondo, and in our own time, that one of the main interests that we see that they have is weaponizing the technology that has come to them. So they're in competition with Russia, they are in competition with China, they may be in competition in the future with nations like India and others as well. So this is a very, very high stakes situation. Yes, having an alien craft is one thing, but giving up their secrets of what they have developed in terms of their own reproduction technology, whether it's the legendary alien reproduction vehicle or other types of technologies that have undoubtedly been worked on over the decades, they're not going to give that up. It's too valuable for them. That's one reason only. Another is simply you've been involved in a cover-up for 80 years. There is a significant threat to their credibility. It's one thing for an individual to say, I was wrong, I misinterpreted the UFO cover-up, and indeed there is a cover-up. It's another thing for the United States military to admit this, because they've been running it. The U.S. military and the intelligence community have been running the UFO cover-up for an entire human lifetime. And, you know, in 80 years of gaslighting the world, they're not simply making that admission to the American public, they're making that admission to the world. And it's not a good look for the United States establishment to say to the world, yeah, actually, we were lying about the world's greatest conspiracy of all time. We have been running it in conjunction with many of your governments, by the way. It's a very difficult position to put themselves in. The United States empire is having enough trouble as it is right now to now take another body blow to its own international credibility. I would say this is a significant issue to at least some of the people making decisions. On top of that, you've got the exposure, the threatened exposure of the true nature of UFO secrecy. You know, ask yourself, how deep does this go? It's extremely deep, to the point where individuals have been threatened, individuals have been killed. and who knows how much else. We've had 80 years of hardcore military threats levied against other military personnel based on what they saw. We've seen instances of threats levied against civilians, ordinary people, having nothing to do with the military, based on what they know. We have an entire lifetime of ridicule against people who have had abduction or encounter experiences, not all of which have been positive. There's going to be a lot of angry people here, and to get into the full nature of that secrecy, to say nothing of the degradation of our political institutions, the severe degradation to our media establishment, as well as to even our academic institutions, all of them would take a significant hit to their credibility once we start really investigating the truth of the fact that there is a reality to this, that there's been lying, and it's very difficult to parse that out. So it's very difficult for the United States government to say, well, yeah, we're going to give you a little bit of truth on this matter, and then to expect the rest of the world simply to sit back and be content with that, and to believe the minuscule parceling out of truth that undoubtedly they would want to do. So I think it's a difficult situation for them. It's like being a little bit pregnant. How can you do that? How can you do a little bit of disclosure? I've not seen how they can square that circle. A genuine disclosure from their point of view, that is the secret keepers, the establishment, presents a real prospect of destabilization on every level, not just to their position, which does become weakened, and we don't really know, could it become untenable? But beyond that, we're talking about releasing energy secrets to the world, perhaps. What does that mean? Does that mean that we will all have free energy, and we'll make the deserts bloom? We'll have, free distilled water from the oceans and all of these wonderful things? Possible. Is it also possible that someone will create a really seriously dangerous weapon out of these free energy technologies? It's a real possibility, and one has to assume that this is a concern. So there's a lot of possibility of destabilization involved in all of this. These are not arguments, by the way, not to proceed with a disclosure, but I think we need to understand that there are genuine obstacles standing in our way, first of all, and also that those secret keepers have their own position. And I can guarantee you they feel very strongly about the justness of their position as well. This is why I started by saying politics is the art of the possible. You've got two absolutely opposed positions on this, and it's not realistic at this point to expect one side to get all of what they want. I want to talk a little bit about the statements of David Grusch and how they fit into the long history of the UFO reality. David Grusch's revelations, in my view, from just studying them as carefully as I can, are all too real. What he has said is that there are, large numbers of craft that are being held by the U.S. defense establishment, a lot of private contractors. This accords perfectly with everything that we've learned in the last 50 plus years, but let's say 50 years of crash retrieval and acquisition retrieval research on alien tech. You can go back to the work of the late, great Leonard Stringfield and many, many others who have brought out scores, I think hundreds of cases of testimony that support this. So really what Grusch is saying is right in line. It's shocking to much of the world, but in fact, in the realm of UFO research, it's in line with what we have already been understanding. And this goes for the same with alien biologics, as he put it. So this is a huge, deep, deep reality that many of us who followed the subject for many years are perhaps psychologically used to. But I think we have to assume that a lot of the world, this is still going to be a big shock for many, many people. The UFO subject, people have known about it, it's been out there, but have people really internalized what this actually means? And I think most people probably have not. So this is going to be as we move forward, it's going to be a very difficult thing to ignore and we're going to increasingly have to come to terms with it. One of the expressions that I've been hearing a lot of in the last couple of years is toothpaste out of the tube. And it's really true. When toothpaste comes out of the tube, you can't get it back in. But what can happen is that the establishment can continue to put in roadblock after roadblock and deception after deception and more bad faith agreements after more bad faith agreements to delay this process for years and decades to come. And I believe that they are prepared to play a very, very effective defensive delay game on this matter for as long as possible, because in my view, there's a definite faction of folks who have, call them the secrecy group. They know full well that by giving up this secret, this for them would be a catastrophic situation, and they will not voluntarily allow that to happen. So they're going to delay, delay, delay. And if that means bribe, if that means blackmail politicians to do that, they'll do it. If they will pressure politicians from passing strengthened UAP Disclosure Acts, they'll do that in any way possible, and so forth. One thing that Danny brought up in his talk just now is the provision about 300 days. So essentially, with the passage of this act, it does mandate that within 300 days, information held by United States government offices, and he can correct me, but I don't know that private contractors are included in this, but that information still must be turned over to the National Archives, and if it's more than 25 years old, unless the president says no due to national security reasons. Now, Danny called this provision extremely limited in its scope, and I would like to have a further conversation about that statement, because I don't know that I feel that this is the case. He may be right. It could be limited, but it seems like a very major loophole to me that would allow an indefinite classification of a lot of UAP, UFO information. And I think we must assume that the secrecy group on the other side of where we stand has every motivation to ensure that, indeed, a lot will come under the provision of national security. I'm writing a fairly extensive volume on the history of USOs, that is water-based UAP phenomena. And I can just say, looking over the many, many statements of retired U.S. Navy personnel, that this phenomenon out at sea has wreaked havoc at times on major United States battleships and warships, including aircraft carriers, on a number of occasions, and to the point where they can scramble communications coming into and leaving the ship, and indeed at times turn the ship to make it just sit dead in the water. I've read a number of accounts that I think are credible. These are not from FOIA. These are from individual testimony. Nevertheless, there's a pattern there. And if this is true, which I believe it is, we have a situation in which the United States military is dealing or trying and failing to deal with a phenomenon that has overwhelming amount of power compared with what they have. And, you know, to think that the head of the United States Navy does not know about all of those encounters, I think is not realistic. And to expect further that they're simply going to allow all of the truth on this matter to come out, I think is also not realistic. So I think that's what we have to keep in mind, that there's a lot of motivation on the other side of this, on the secrecy side of this, that's going to have other attitudes about this. Now, whatever the truth on this, I believe firmly that people ought to know what is going on. That means, whether there's positive interactions that we are having with these other beings, or negative interactions that people are having with these other beings. That's one thing that we need to know. Another thing we need to understand is to get a grasp of the full volume of activity that is going on in the world at this very moment. We need to remind ourselves as a community that when we're talking about the UAP Disclosure Act, we're trying to get an understanding of what has happened in the past in relation to the U.S. military and UAP. All of that's very important. But we are in danger at times of losing sight of something perhaps even more important, that every single day we are blanketed by a phenomenon that A, we're not talking about, B, is of extraordinary capability, C, can seem to do anything that it wants to do. There, as far as I can see when I read report after report, and I've gone through thousands upon thousands in the last year alone, it seems that there's not a real limitation as to what they're able to do, or if there are very loose limitations far beyond what we can do. So this is a significant reality that we're not really talking about as a society. What are they doing? What is the end game here? It could be benign. It could be completely concerned with preserving Earth's environment and helping humanity move peacefully into the next stage of its existence. We can't rule that out. But do we actually know? We don't know. Whatever the truth is, we ought to know. And the problem is that we're so blindsided by our government, by the society that has been manipulated by our government through mainstream media, that we don't even have the right questions to be asking, let alone getting any answers. I've occasionally referred to our society as a pretend democracy. Both of those words are important. We like to pretend that we're an actual democracy. But of course, we're not. We are not. And every academic study that's looked into this has referred to all the Western system, including the U.S., as an oligarchy. That is absolutely true. That's what this is. But we masquerade as a democracy because that's what will keep people happy. My question to you is, can we have any chance of making this a real democracy to some extent? Are we ever going to be able to do that? One way that we can is by demanding and getting genuine truth and honesty about what is arguably the single most pressing, important geopolitical and human issue that one can imagine, which is, are there other intelligent beings here on Earth operating? And what are they doing? That is the fundamental thing that we need to get on the table in terms of public discussion. If we don't do that, we are in a pretend democracy. So, I'm going to wrap it up here, but I'll just say for many, many years, I've felt that I wouldn't want a disclosure if it meant living in a pretend disclosure in essentially a global or national totalitarian kind of a system in which truth is presented for me, curated for me, without me having the ability to get my own truth. I don't want that. I'll take a ship to the moon and live there. I don't want to live on an Earth that is a global totalitarian system in which there is no voice for the actual people. I don't want that disclosure. Not interested. I want a disclosure that allows us to create the vision that we've always believed that we should be, which is a genuine Republican democratic society in which the people are sovereign. And we can't really do that unless we have genuine honesty on this matter, which we so desperately need. So again, do we have any chance of creating a genuine democratic society by bringing this issue to the forefront as it deserves to be? I'll leave it there, and thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to speak with you here.